Welcome everyone to this episode of the Sync Your Life podcast. I am joined today by my friend Angie Barnes. Angie and I are both health coaches, and we met several years ago. I don't know when exactly we met, but we met through our health and fitness businesses. And fast forward to today, where she's no longer in the Midwest where I am, but she and I have reconnected, and she has kind of dove in headfirst into the Sync digital course. And so, as you guys know, we're spending this month doing these sort of live coaching calls where I'm hopping on with different clients that are in the Sync course, and I'm asking about their journey so far, where they are and what's working for them, what they're learning. And I just wanted to bring it to you guys through the podcast. So she has been willing to step up and say, yes, I'll do this. I'll do the call. I'll talk about it. I know she's also talking about it on her social media. She's trying to spread the word like I am about women's health. So I'm so glad that she's taken the time today to meet with us and to talk and to share her story. Angie, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I am super excited because, I don't think that people are talking about this as much, but I think so many of us feel that something is not right and we don't know what. And so, your podcast is really helping people realize like, hey, like what you're feeling isn't abnormal, but it doesn't mean that it has to be forever for you, so I'm super excited to be here, and I totally geek out on all of this stuff, and I'm really grateful for the course and the podcast and all of that stuff. And I feel like the stars kind of aligned to bring us back together at the perfect time. And so thank you for having me.
Yeah. So tell everybody that's listening, who is Angie day to day?
Crazy? No. So I am a mom of two. It's hard to believe that my kids are no longer littles. I have a almost 16-year-old and a 12-year-old son. Like you had mentioned, we moved from the Midwest, from Indiana to Florida about 4.5 years ago already, which is crazy how fast that time has gone. And that move actually was a really pivotal point looking back now to kind of where I am and where all of this started. But yeah, I've worked from home for, 12 years, or since 2012. So almost 12, what is that, 10-ish years, doing, marketing, PR, health and fitness coaching, like you. My husband and I started an Amazon business as well. So yeah, I mean, I work from here all day, every day. And that's kind of me, just, living the life of a mom of teens, which is a whole different ball game than a life of toddlers. I will tell you that. I've had to grow as much as my kids have over the years. So, but it's all good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm so glad we've reconnected too. I would love for you to kind of tell us, when did you last feel your best? You just mentioned this move that was 4.5 years ago. Is that when you started feeling like things were off for you, or tell us kind of where this started?
Yeah. I mean, so even before the move, like many women, right? Like you have kids, you kind of feel like you lose yourself, are mom and nothing else. And so it was probably like 2013 or so, I kind of found, the whole Beachbody world, and I loved it. I felt my best, mentally, physically. I had lost like 20 pounds. I felt amazing. And I won't, and I say that, and my health and maintaining where I was pretty much on autopilot. It didn't take a lot of effort because things just worked. I just felt like my body finally clicked. Fast forward to 2017, and we moved to Florida. Obviously, it's a huge life change, a huge stressor, whatever, that's fine. When you move to Florida, all of a sudden you start feeling like you're vacationing in Florida. So you're eating like you're on vacation, you're drinking like you're on vacation. And then you realize, oh, I'm not on vacation. Like, this is my life. So I got to dial this back. So, whatever. Okay, fine. Start dialing it back. Well, nothing is changing. Now my weight has gone up. I just, and really that's where it started. I noticed the weight gain, and I noticed the fact I could not lose it. I was just like, what the heck? I did 80-day obsession. I did no alcohol for 2 weeks, time nutrition, nothing. Now I'm getting mad. So, but in addition to that aspect, I distinctly remember it was July of 2018, so about 9-ish months. And I didn't want to get up out of bed. I was exhausted. I was spent. I felt like I was almost having a breakdown. You know what I mean? Like I felt like I hit a wall, and it kind of clicked at that point. And I realized, man, like I have had a lot of stressful events back to back to back to back, preparing for the move, moving, my kids starting new schools and whole different, we did Catholic school up north. Now it's public school. That was a whole different thing. Those school choices didn't work out. So now, we had to, try and find new schools and da 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 da. Meanwhile, you have the regular stressors of life. So in my mind, I felt like the visual that I had is like one of those I don't know, barometers or whatever, where it's like green, red. I felt like I was like "Tick, tick, 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 tick,"
Yeah.
for so long. And my body was like, done, I'm crashing, I'm done.
Mhm.
So that, when for whatever reason that day when I felt like, okay, this is not normal, something is not right with me, that's when I was like, I need to go see my doctor.
Mhm.
So that is literally the first time that I kind of raised my hand and said, I
Something's
don't
off.
feel like myself. Yeah, I don't feel like myself. I didn't feel like myself physically, mentally, emotionally. I felt like a hot mess, and I was very aware that I didn't feel like myself. So then that created more stress and anxiety because I'm like, what's wrong with me? You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So you went to your, I'm guessing, general practitioner, and you
Mhm.
said this was recently, relatively recently, and you said, what's going on, right? Like my check engine light's
Yeah.
flashing. What can we do to investigate?
Right. So, and she, so meanwhile, in 2018, I turned 40 in May. So this was 2 months after that. Which, P.S., I never believed the hype. Like things change when you turn 40. Things change when you turn 40. Okay. I was like, I am not going to be that person. Well, I was. So I'm in her office, and I told her, I said, I feel depressed. I think, like I'm generally a happy go lucky, very positive person. And I just felt, I didn't feel like myself at all. And I said, I gained, 10 pounds, and I just can't seem to shake it. I feel off. That's what I kept saying, is I feel off. And this little perky thing, who was younger than 40, no judgment, but I'm just saying, she looked at me and she said, oh, well, you're 40 now. So, you need to eat fewer carbs. I was like, okay, and she did do some testing. I think that she may have done like hormone tests, but now knowing what I know now, I didn't test at the right time. She didn't tell me that I needed to test on the 21st day of my cycle. So who knows, I could go back and look, but who knows really
How
how
accurate.
accurate. Right.
Right.
The other thing, she did find that I was low in vitamin B12, like really low. And that's such a silly, crazy range. What is it, like 200 to like 1100 or something like that?
Right.
But I was like 211, so within normal range. But she said, yeah,
Low.
you could take some, but there was zero guidance. Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like just go find some B12 somewhere and just kind of take
And
it.
figure it
Like,
out. Yeah. Figure it
right.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
and I always like to say this too, I never want this podcast or anything to ever come across as if I'm bashing modern medicine, because it's not the case. I mean, I've said this before, but my father was diagnosed with cancer when I was 12 and is still living today because of modern medicine. So there's certainly a place for modern medicine, and I'm not trying to discredit the knowledge of doctors when it comes to medical health. But it is kind of funny. And I do think it's worth bringing awareness to this recurring theme that I keep hearing, right? And at first I thought it was just me. I thought it was just my experience with my doctor and my own hormone health journey. And then when I started sharing it and meeting people like Angie and the people that you're going to be hearing from on this podcast, I realized this story keeps getting repeated. The story of the woman who goes into her OB's office or her GP's office and says, I feel off, something's wrong. and they're told usually 3 different things. And this is almost always the case. They're told, oh, well, you're aging, so you're getting close to perimenopause. This is just a way of life. Like, sorry about you, basically. Or, yes, you should restrict carbs, like, reduce your carbs as much as you can. And third, they'll say, oh, well, we've done your blood work and everything looks normal.
Yes.
And I just want to call attention to that in particular, because like Angie's mentioning, there are a few things that we teach in the Sync Digital course that I think we can talk about here in a second, but understanding what testing is accurate for your hormones and what also is inaccurate, but also understanding timing for those tests. So, we like to tell people, especially at the age of 40, right? If I'm not a medical doctor, but if Angie were to say to me, I'm feeling off, and I knew that she was recently 40, I would say, okay, then the first thing I would want to start looking at would be like her progesterone levels. I would want to start to see, okay, because we know progesterone is usually starting to fall years before estrogen starts to fall. We want to look at that, right? And so for a doctor to not give Angie advice on what time of her cycle to test, she mentioned day 21. If you're a 28-day cycle, or if you're having menstrual cycles for 28 days, you want to make sure that you're testing about a week before your bleed. And the reason for that is because that's your peak luteal phase. So that's the peak of your progesterone. So we want to see, what is that number when that progesterone is supposed to be in full effect? What's that number, right? And so if she would have just randomly had been tested when she was just in the office one day, and the doctor's like, let's go ahead and pull some blood work, and it's maybe day 10 of her cycle, there shouldn't be any progesterone there, right? And so she's going to get inaccurate results for that progesterone number. So hopefully that makes sense. But also what I like to say, and I think this is going to be a repeated theme that people listening to the podcast will hear. If you're working with a doctor who's only doing that, blood draw, that one-time blood draw, and they're not bringing up the concept of salivary testing or urine testing, they're not getting a full picture of what your body is doing. So we're going to get more into that. We're going to talk more about your testing here in a second, but so you knew something was off. You went to the doctor. They told you basically this is aging. So what happened from there, and kind of what led you from there into, starting the Sync course and kind of becoming your own best advocate?
So I continued to go to that doctor for at least another year or so, and I did everything that a lot of people are, oh, I'm going to do a new exercise program. I'm going to dial in my nutrition more, blah, 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 all of the things. And was still not getting results. I talked to my OB, who actually is very holistic minded. She's vegan. She's, she's great. She gave me some blood work. Did say that I had low progesterone, but I'm pretty sure that I did not test on the proper date with that one either. Anyway, fast forward, when I was like, I told my husband, I said, I am not, like, it was time for me to go back to my general practitioner just for like my annual well check or whatever. I said, I'm not going back to her. There's nothing worse than leaving a doctor's office feeling unseen and feeling like there is just, this is like that there is no help for you. So I got on little mom blogs down here and found a functional medicine doctor who I'm so grateful. And this added bonus, she takes insurance. Because I think a lot of times that impedes a lot of people.
Yes.
They're scared of the cost. Hey, if I can have a $25 copay as opposed to paying $150 for an office visit, yeah, let's do it. So I was like, and she was right down the street. I'm like, this is great. So I went to her, and it really was the first time I remember leaving and feeling seen. Like, oh, like she saw me, she heard me, she was doing in-depth testing. We did do a saliva test, and that was for cortisol and, yada, yada. We discovered, all of my labs again were normal. But my cholesterol was really high. That was like the red flag. Like, it was really high, especially from waking to that first little spit vial. And but the crazy thing is, okay, so what do you do to reduce stress? And there's generally not like a pill for that. So it's a lot of lifestyle stuff, right? so I did that, and I, kind of kept going back, and I just still wasn't feeling different. I did get on some supplements, for adrenal support, which I don't think it hurts anything, but it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better, So how I found the course, I was actually scrolling on Facebook, and I had heard at some point, or I had seen you mention something somewhere in the social media sphere about hormone health a while back. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, whatever. Didn't really think much of that. Well, then I was scrolling and came across our mutual friend Jamie's post, and everything she was saying, I feel off. I don't feel like myself. I'm unable to lose weight. I'm really like agitated. I just, I'm like, like I hear you. And so I messaged her, and I had a feeling that she was working with you. And so when she said, oh, I've started this course, the Sync Your Life course with Jenny Swisher, I was like, oh man, okay. I think that this may be for me. So from there, I think I reached out to you, either you or Jenny, connected me to the podcast. And it was like I was listening to somebody talking in the mirror to me. I felt like, I feel like I'm going to get emotional. I felt like not alone. And I felt like, oh, like there is hope. And, I have been seeing the functional medicine doctor. And so a lot of the tests, pretty much all of them, aside from the Dutch, I had. So I felt like, okay, I'm on the right path. The course has given me the confidence to keep going down that path. You know what I mean? Like, it's not enough to just get those tests. It's okay. Now I feel like I've always been an advocate for myself, but now I feel like I really have the tools and the confidence to go into my doctor. I just was there last week and said, hey, one thing that you talk about, my progesterone is in normal range, my estrogen is in normal range. I knew nothing about the needed ratio between the two. And that had never been brought up to me, even at my functional medicine doctor. So I went to her and said, hey, I know these are both in normal ranges. However, the ratio between the two is really low. I'm interested in starting, or trying a bioidentical progesterone cream. And, she was open to it. I'll be honest, she was a little skeptical, but I'm like, okay, she doesn't have to be 100% on board right now. Let's just try it, So, yeah.
Yeah. So it's been awesome you're one of what I would consider to be some of the go-getters, right? Like sometimes there are people that hop on the course and it feels like they just jumped in yesterday. And then like 2 days later, they're like, I binged all the videos. I've listened to all the podcasts. I have an appointment tomorrow and I've downloaded all my papers, and, and then it's like less than a week later. So I feel like you were just on top of it, and you went right into that. And I've loved hearing your updates. And I know that you've filled the prescription for the bioidentical progesterone cream. So we'll see how that helps you. I always like to tell people, at least for me, it took 3 or 4 cycles to see much improvement, but she's right. And I think what she's getting at here is, sometimes you can even have the right functional medicine doctor with the right knowledge that gives you the right testing, but understanding what deeper questions to ask about that testing is where I think a lot of women, obviously you don't know what you don't know. Right. And so how can you ask something that you don't know? And so that was my intention with the course, was to educate women so that when they're sitting in their doctor's office, they feel confident in knowing this is how my cycle is supposed to be, or this is how I'm supposed to be feeling. I don't feel that way. And so therefore I'm going to ask these particular questions that pertain to my symptoms and my issues to really kind of push back on the doctor a little bit. And it just depends. It depends on the doctor, right? Like it depends on the person that you're working with as far as what they tend to see and what they tend to treat. Like every doctor is of course different, but I'm excited for you because I think you're on the right track. Obviously you've kind of known that cortisol and that stress plays a role for you. But I kind of want to rewind a little bit to where you were talking about, like, your cortisol was high in the mornings and when you did the saliva test and whatnot. I'm guessing that, and you kind of alluded to this, but I just wanted to bring it forward that, you were doing all the things as far as exercising, eating the way that you probably ate maybe like in your 20s or 30s, right? And
I ate like crap in my 20s and 30s.
Okay.
In my 20s, in my mid 30s is when I turned.
When when things took a correction. Okay. So what I'm getting at though is like, you're exercising and here's your cortisol's high. And so I just wanted to add this in for anyone listening, right? Like, as much as I'm a personal trainer and I'm a fitness junkie, so I love to work out, but at the same time, I really had to learn the hard way that exercise is still a stressor on the body. Yeah. And so I see this happen so much where women are like, oh, I can't lose the weight, or I can't make progress. I think I'll just work harder. And so they start to do 2 workouts a day, or they add a walk, or they start to do more and they're pushing their body more, when in reality, that's just surging that cortisol more or depleting the cortisol. That can happen too. And it's causing adrenal issues, right? And so if you are, we won't know for sure, right? Until you're on this cream and you start to see the differences from the progesterone and whatnot. But once we start to really support the adrenals and we start to fill any voids, in what I like to call the hormone chair, the 4-legged hormone chair, like once we start to get those legs stable again, then we can really see like, okay, where was this coming from? You know what I mean? Like sometimes you don't know until you can kind of look back in hindsight and say, okay, now I know what was happening. So was that the case for you? Like you were exercising extra hard, trying to lose the weight, but yet your cortisol numbers are coming back high stress.
Right. Yes. So I won't say that I was exercising more or adding more, but I was going back to strenuous programs, max 30, that I was like, man, I killed it on that. I felt so strong. Even my husband has said, you don't exercise the way that you used to. That's kind of hard to hear. I know he doesn't mean it that way. And I'm like, I can't. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just can't. And so after the first round of tests, I had a call with my functional medicine doctor to go over the labs. And that was the first time I ever made that connection between exercise being a stressor. She said, exercise is great, but if it's too strenuous, like you just said, like it's jacking up your levels even more. So it's been a mind reset to know that, I just need to think about movement, staying active and moving, and the whole, syncing the workouts to your cycle was like mind blowing. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this makes sense. And it also, like that first week when we're pushing harder, and first week of your cycle, pushing harder and lifting heavier and this and that, because this was my first cycle that I was actually like going through and truly syncing, I almost felt like I was giving myself permission to do that, because I had kind of gotten back to, oh, well, I can't, like, I'm just so tired. And what I'm realizing is that I was following a calendar of a program that had nothing, that had no correlation to my cycle. And so here I'm like, oh, I'm dragging tush on this program. Well, I should be dragging tush on that program at that point in my cycle. You know what I mean? So that was like a huge connection, because now like mentally I'm like, oh, you know what? Like this week I'm going for it, and then it also gives me permission that last week to really listen to my body and to really be okay with slowing down and just doing more of the low impact and the things like that. And if I can just interject here also, as a mom of a teenager, this has been so helpful. Our cycles are different. She experiences a lot more symptoms, PMS and things like that than I ever have, and she has longer cycles. But I'm able to educate her and empower her to know, hey, like for instance, last week she started and she wanted to go to the gym. And usually she's like, she's all about it. And she's, working out longer than me. And she came in after like 20 minutes and she looked spent. Yeah. And I said, honey, you need to rest. those first 2 days. Jenny told me you need rest. And so I think that as a parent and, like it's so important because this stuff was never taught in sixth grade sex ed class. We just learned how to like track our period with the little red dot and slide over. And it's crazy. I'm 43 years old and I feel like I'm just starting to understand the female reproductive system, and actually what happens in our body, which is crazy.
And isn't it cool too? Like there's so many things that I want to say based on what you just said, but the first thing that comes to mind is like, I hear this a lot from women. I hear this phrase, I felt like I had permission. Like I hear that phrase so much, like, oh my gosh, it felt so good to rest on my period because I felt like I had permission to rest, which tells me that if you were relieved to have permission, that there was most likely a sign your body was giving you that you were ignoring, right? Yes. And so when I step into the course or whatever and say it's okay to rest, for a lot of women to say, oh, thank you, right? Yeah. Like, and you're right, like if not all exercise regimens are catered to the male body. And so for you and I, right, like being home fitness program people, and I'm very type A, like when you get a calendar, you follow the calendar. The calendar says that you're going to do plyometric jumps until your brain falls out. Like you're going to do plyometric, and so, and I remember experiencing the same thing. Obviously I've followed people like Dr. Stacy Sims, who've been really big pioneers in this field. And I remember feeling the same way when she would talk about phases of, this is when you should lift heavy. And when I started applying cycle syncing to my fitness, I was like, yes, of course, this makes sense. Like as soon as I would start to pick up weights during that follicular phase, I would be like, is this really going to be, and then you finish the workout and you're like, I just felt like a beast.
Yeah.
Like, and when you're done, you're like, yes, like this does feel good, right. And then you get to ovulation and you're like, I know for me, I kind of ignored, at the very beginning, when I started cycle syncing, I was like, I was so used to working out like 6 days a week that when I got to ovulation, it felt like a cramp in my style. Like it was like, oh, yeah. I don't want to take off like 2 more, And so I would push through it and I would finish those workouts exhausted. And I would be like, and so after a couple times of that, I was like, Jenny, no, like there's something to this, like you need to be listening. And so it's funny how often I hear both the permission piece and just how good women start feeling when they listen to their physiology. Right. And when you're just taking the Orange Theory classes or you're, getting on the Peloton every day or whatever, and you're just exercising for the sake of exercising or exercising for the sake of the habits that you've made that are most likely catered to a man's science, right? Yeah. Like when you start to say, no, I'm going to cycle sync, you will be blown away. Like anyone listening to this, like you'll be blown away with how much better you feel from doing that.
Yeah.
So, okay, cool. So, and I'm glad you mentioned that too about your daughter, because I think that this, I just mentioned this on the previous podcast, my interview with Jamie, women who have teenage daughters, it's funny to me how, yes, this information is so important for them, but a lot of times it's, I'll see it where like the reason that the woman buys the course or that dives into the course is because they want to help their daughter with hormonal issues. And then they realize, oh my gosh, this is really helping me too. Right. Yeah. And so if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, my daughter really struggles with PMS or heavy periods or whatever the case is, it can help both of you for sure.
Yeah.
So, and I'm glad, and I'm grateful too, that you mentioned that about like understanding your cycle at the age of 43. Cause I can remember when I first started learning this stuff for my own sake, which was probably around 27 for me, I felt like a fish out of water. Like when I started meeting with a functional medicine doctor who was very in tune with hormone health, and she would ask me questions like, what day of your cycle are you on? Or I would be like, what? Like, what are you even talking about? Like, how do I count that? I started at a very basic level of not understanding how I was designed to feel. Right. And so, I'm so grateful that everybody that's been in the course always has this kind of feedback of like, thank you. I now have the confidence to understand what my body's doing. I had no idea that I had different phases of energy,
Yeah.
So,
and I think, knowledge really is power. And whether it's knowledge, kind of touching back on, giving permission to slow down or whatever, when you understand why you need to slow down or why you feel so tired, then it's like you said, like, yeah, like makes sense, like you're not just being lazy. It's your body is needing energy to do X, Y, or Z, and
Yep.
it's kind of, the same thing with food, once you know better, you can choose better.
Mhm.
And so I think, it's just, it's really powerful. And I feel like I have like, you know, dove, is that the word? Yeah, dove, head first in. But, even like I was anxious going to my doctor, because I was like, oh my gosh, like, I mean, she's functional medicine, but I don't want her to think that I'm like questioning this or that, and I'm still learning, truthfully, I didn't know that there were, multiple phases of your cycle. And it was also like an aha moment when I'm listening to the course and it's like, day one of your cycle is the first day you bleed. I'm like, no shit, sure, no crap. I thought it was the next day. Like that's like day one, I mean, as simple as that,
Right.
it's just, yeah, it's very powerful. And I just think women need to do themselves a favor, whether they are experiencing issues or not, whether they feel off or not, just having an understanding of what is going on in their body is so important,
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I tell my husband all the time, I'm like, I really wish that I had known this years before, because if I would have had testing done when I felt good, it would be awesome to compare when I started to
Yes.
feel off, what was happening. So yeah, that's a great point to make, that like, even for the woman who feels in that, like if you're feeling like your body is in balance and everything's happily operating, you have regular cycles, that doesn't mean it's always going to be the case, right? Especially
Mhm.
as we age. So having testing under your belt, I like to do mine twice a year. Some people just say annually, but having something like a Dutch test to really see what your cycle is doing over the course of 28 to 30 days that you can then compare to later, can be huge, especially
Yeah.
if you face an issue. So what would you say, in the course itself or in the Facebook community, what has been the biggest game changer for you so far, aside from just learning and understanding your body? What are some things that were just aha moments for you?
I think, and I had heard it a couple other places, but adding magnesium into my regimen was, I mean, that was like an aha moment. I felt like within days I was sleeping better, I was less stressed. Um, so, in that I feel like, there's so many supplements out there, right? And you don't know what to take or how to take it and blah, blah, and all of that.
Mhm.
So that was like an immediate, like, oh, like I could start to see, the light. But I think as far as like the community goes, I mean, it's really just knowing that what I'm feeling is not abnormal, but just because it's normal, it doesn't mean that it has to be my normal forever, you
Mhm.
know? And so I think that those are probably, the two biggest things. And I know that, there's other, actually, I was just listening to your podcast about top 10 supplements. So there are other things. And I will offer this if I can. I think women who are like me, who literally desperate to feel like myself again, desperate to lose the weight, desperate to not feel crazy, desperate for answers, we often want to just take all of the supplements and do the this and the that. And it can be overwhelming. And then it just feels like, well, why not do whatever? So, just starting small and really figuring out what works for you. I think in that podcast you said, the one supplement, the one nutrient, the one whatever that your body needs is what your body needs. So it is a slow process, and that's like me starting the progesterone. I I don't know that it's going to be the end all be all, but I'm going to start with that because I didn't want to start too many different things, right? And then I don't really know
What's working and what's not.
what's
Mhm.
working, right? Although at that point, if everything, if I was starting all this stuff and everything was working, I'd be like, I'm never stopping. But
Yeah.
but yeah, so just not feeling alone and feeling like you have not just a, hey, take this or hey, try this, but you have like the reasons why,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's often like the missing link.
Yeah. Well, I think the main theme that I'm hearing, not just from you, but from others, and that I want to, call out is it's not okay to feel off and to keep
Mhm.
living that way. And I was just talking to a friend yesterday who was saying she's been taking an antidepressant and some things for anxiety for the past few years. And now that she's kind of starting this journey of holistic health and trying to get this testing done and work with her doctor. And by the way, sometimes that is a quick process to get your testing and to get on supplementation. And sometimes it takes time. Sometimes this is a journey of just getting the right doctor and then getting the test results
Right.
back. And so having the patience through that and having the support through something like our Facebook community, I think can be huge. But she was talking about like, gosh, I've been on these things. She also has a history of birth control, and we've talked through that. But she's like, I've been on these things, and now that I'm getting my test results back and I'm getting some answers, I'm realizing I don't even know if I really needed those things. Like maybe I just needed to address sort of the underlying cause, right? Of a hormone imbalance that I've just been living with, that I thought was normal, or I thought that I was just different. Like I thought that I just couldn't, I was upset or depressed or whatever over emotional circumstances.
Right.
So, and I just want to say this too, I haven't shared this on the podcast, but I've had two different times in my life, one in my 20s and then one again in around 2017 in my 30s, where I've had what I would consider to be, they must have been pretty significant progesterone drops. For me, that's my weak leg of the hormone chair, is the sex hormone leg. And my progesterone is always really low, like super low, like my body doesn't want to produce it on its own. And so as a result of that, these two different times in my life that I've experienced these big dips have been big dips for me emotionally. Like I have been very, to give you an example, both, and I tell this to my husband all the time. I'm like, I don't understand why there are so many similarities between both of these different phases of my life. But in my early 20s and again in my mid 30s, I would be like afraid to drive a car. Like my anxiety level was high that I felt like I was just on edge all day long. And I would get in the car and it was like a panic attack waiting to happen. And I remember when I had this happen in my 20s, and then when it started happening again in my 30s, of course, you know how it is, like you never make the connection of like, I'm like, why is this happening again? You don't think about like what helped the first time. And so we did some testing, and it, my doctor says, oh my gosh, like we thought you were deficient before, like now it's dipping, like it's dropping again. We've got to increase your dose or whatever. And when I started to do that, progesterone is a calming hormone, and I by no means mean that it's great for everyone. So obviously work with your doctor if you have questions. But for me, when I started to increase that, it's probably very common sense, but it didn't make sense to me at the time. When I started to increase it, it was like this overwhelming sense of calm came over me. And I was at the point of seeking out like medications to help me get through. Like I was having trouble waking up in the morning. I was feeling jittery. I was waking up in the middle of the night and I couldn't fall back asleep. So obviously my adrenals were factored in there too.
Wow.
But and something as simple as, a couple of capsules of ashwagandha and licorice root, right? With a little cream that I put on my wrist, as opposed to pharmaceutical antidepressants or whatever the case is that just treat the surface. So I just wanted to mention that because I think a lot of times I wonder sometimes actually how many women are out there living in this state of low energy. I measure everything in energy, right? So it even comes back to that workout concept. Like you, as a woman, you can ask yourself every day, do I feel like this workout I'm about to do is going to give me energy, or is it going to deplete my energy?
Right.
And the answer to that is what you should do. So if you feel like it's going to deplete you, it's time for a rest day. If you feel like it could give you energy, you should do it. Right. And so everything's measured in energy. But I think a lot of women are living in this state of low energy, whether that's mentally, emotionally, physically, all of the above. And I sometimes wonder, what happens if we take away pharmaceutical and we implement holistic wellness and we start to work with people who understand root cause,
right,
and we start to supplement ourselves according to what we're deficient in individually. Then we can up level it, right? Then we can take it to the next level and we can cycle sync and we can say, okay, now I'm a master of my hormones and now I know what my body's doing. So now I can really maximize that energy. So you're in this process of like, you've started, you've got this functional wellness practitioner on your side. You've got the right testing. I know you're using your sync scope. You're starting the progesterone cream. So what's next for you? Like your cycle's thinking, what's next? Are you thinking about certification? Are you
I
like,
am. Well, yes, I am, because like I mentioned, I just think this is so important to share, in the couple of little things that I've shared on social media. It's like, oh my gosh, oh my, yeah, you start getting all of these messages, and so yes, I would love to get certified. I think that this program is powerful, and I think it's really important that women take control of their power. And I agree with you. I have nothing against modern medicine, but I think there's so much more available outside of it as well. And side note, my functional medicine doctor is an MD. She has she runs I think she calls it integrative health,
right?
so they use both,
Yeah.
depending
Yeah.
on what is needed. And I think that's an amazing approach. So yeah, I mean, and I'm not completely done with the course yet. So I'm making my way through it. And I will say, one of the things is I've always felt like I've been pretty in tune with my body, but now, like, I'm really in tune, like, today I'm on, I think, day 17 of my cycle or whatever. Yesterday I was crabby, and I'm like, wait a second, where's my calendar? Should I be crabby today? I don't know. Why am I crabby? Is this hormone related? So because I feel like, for me, I can go, okay, like, this makes sense why I'm feeling this way, and maybe I supplement a little bit differently, and that's the other thing. So where I'm going is just, continue to learn, and to, then share, and hopefully be able to, help other women, empower themselves to find their best self and health as well.
Yeah. No, that's great. And we were joking last night, because we kind of hung out a little bit last night, and I was like, your husband is going to learn so much, because he's going to start to pick up on, like, I know my husband will be like, what time of the cycle is this? Like, he's so, and of course he's also my podcast editor.
Yeah.
So he gets to hear all this and learn about it, but it's so true. I mean, it's, once you start to really understand and it makes sense to you, you
Yeah.
can't help but share it. Right. So you're
I know.
sharing it on your social media, and we should be, because women need to hear this message, but you're also sharing it at home. So your kids are going to hear about it. Your husband's going to hear about it. And it just starts to make sense. Like, it's one of those things that just does. So I'm so grateful that you took the time to be with us today. For anyone listening who is interested in learning more about finding a functional medicine practitioner, there's actually an episode of the podcast that you can refer to for that, and I'll link it up in the show notes. Angie, thanks so much for being with us today. I know we'll talk again soon.
Thank you for having me.
I'll see you in the
Sounds good.
course. All right.
All
Awesome.
right.
Bye-bye.